In this video, we're going to be checking out 5 really clever garden enclosures that are made with EMT conduit and MakerPipe connectors. And if you don't know what those materials are, essentially EMT conduit is an off-the-shelf material that you can get at places like Lowe's, Home Depot, True Value, different hardware and home improvement stores. And we manufacture connectors in upstate South Carolina that allow you to connect pieces of EMT conduit together to create all kinds of awesome projects like these garden enclosures that we're going to be checking out today. And these are really awesome. These are all shared by customers in our community, and these have some really cool designs in them, as we're going to see. This first one I love. This comes from Steve. And this enclosure has kind of a hidden feature. You know, it looks kind of normal if you look at it right now, but as you can see in this photo, both sides kind of Lamborghini door style swing up out of the way and give you full access to the garden, which is fantastic and really awesome. And usually, you know, people try to make hinges and things for EMT conduit and make gates, but this just makes the whole side of the build fold up and out of the way, and it just utilizes a connector that we manufacture in a really, simple way that makes it really easy to accomplish this. But essentially, this is just a, cubular frame with 890-degree connectors used to make this main cube around the raised garden bed they have here. And essentially they added some 45-degree bracing with a couple of the 45-degree connectors that we manufacture. And then we'll just highlight kind of how they did the specific hack here, which is, I guess, not really a hack because it's actually a functionality of a connector that we manufacture, which is the adjustable angle hinge connector. And the way it's designed, the top puzzle piece grabs onto that vertical piece of conduit, and then this bottom half, this end clamp we call it, will hinge inside of those 2 puzzle piece clamps there, and it allows this whole panel to kind of flip up and out of the way, and then of course you just fold it down. And so to accomplish that and kind of accommodate for the space that takes up, you can see the vertical piece of conduit in the corners just runs completely through the 90 and then extends up a few more inches, which is really awesome. And then I think we see a close-up also of the T connector here. Looks like he just added a T connector to make this be able to hinge and swivel, so the legs can fold up and out of the way whenever you fold down the 2 sides, and that makes a lot of sense. And that's just the standard T-connect that we manufacture. Is probably, I would say, left loose a little bit. It looks like he added some maybe electrical tape to the bottom here. So because the top half of the connector tightens first, by adding that electrical tape here, he just made it where the bottom half was secured, and then it still left the top loose enough to hinge, is what I'm pretty sure he did there. And that's just really awesome, a great idea, and a great way to do this, to be able to hinge these panels and add these legs that fold up and down. And then last but not least, of course, the enclosure material is secured to the frame. We can see it looks like with a bunch of Velcro straps, and it looks like some really good chicken wire with some small squares, which, the enclosure material that you choose really depends on the kind of animals and pests and things you're trying to keep out. This is really cool. Thanks so much, Steve, for sharing this. I always love seeing this one and sharing this build. It's a really great idea, and I think I'm going to be doing a build breakdown on this specific build and highlight more of the connectors and things later this week, so be sure to subscribe if you want to see that. And again, just thank you, Steve, for sharing this. Next up is a really simple enclosure, and this comes from David. And the reason I say this is really clever is because it's just a very simple garden cube that is modular and is being used for trellising at times, and then it's also being used as an enclosure, as we can see in this final photo here, because it just has some of this enclosure material secured to it really quickly and easily. So if you're building, if you have garden beds and you're planning to garden throughout the year, you could even add greenhouse plastic to this at some point during the year. You can add trellises whenever you're ready, and then of course you can add the enclosure material. But it's just really a simple cube around the garden beds using more of those 90-degree connectors that we just highlighted a second ago, as well as some of the 180-degree connectors that we manufacture, which break up long horizontal spans and add a vertical support pole as well. And that's the best thing to use in large structures like this. And then it's just a matter of draping the enclosure material. Nothing fancy. There's no gates on this. Nothing too crazy, really, just the cubes and then the enclosure material secured on the outside. It looks like it's kind of just bunched up on the ends, and then using the binder clips to bunch it up and secure it in place. And again, just nice and simple and easy, and gets the job done and keeps the crops clear and free from animals and pests. So really cool. Thanks so much for sharing this, David. Love seeing it. Next up is a massive enclosure. This comes from Ralph. And I really just highlight this one because a lot of times people say EMT conduit is not strong enough for DIY projects. And that's because they're not really familiar with building with it with MakerPipe connectors. Because that's why we manufactured the connector system, so you guys could build projects and utilize a material that's not really often used for DIY projects. And this is a great build that kind of showcases that, and showcases the fact that you can make really large and strong projects if you use some bracing techniques and some things incorporated integrated into it. So as we can see, this is a massive enclosure. Of course, we're not going to break down every single connector, but essentially it's just a cube shape, a very large one with a lot of vertical supports using that 180-degree connector that we highlighted a second ago, where essentially these horizontal spans are just broken up. And then there's 180-degree connectors. It looks like 3, maybe 4 per vertical, and then just kind of extend that until you get the length that you want on the whole frame. And then he's got 45-degree connectors attached to those verticals, and those are just running up to the roof peak. And then he's just using 90-degree connectors up there for a 90-degree roof peak at the very top. And just a ton of connectors. But really what I wanted to highlight is the fact that you can make a strong build like this and then just incorporate some bracing, as we can see here. A lot of triangular bracing using the 45-degree connectors. Here we can see some photos of the crops and things, which is really awesome. And apparently these are the deer they're trying to keep out. So glad to see that they foiled their plans, but really awesome. And then here you can kind of see the 45-degree connector making that triangle to the other side, as well as some T connectors grabbing onto that and grabbing onto different points in the frame to add some verticals and just make it strong. And of course, they've got cattle panels secured to the framework. And I don't see exactly how they did that. I like to recommend using metal zip ties because they're strong and heavy duty and last outside a lot longer than normal zip ties. So I don't know if they use those, but those are a good option if you're looking for a way to secure enclosure materials and things to your frames. Really awesome job, Ralph. Love seeing this. Thanks so much for sharing it. Next up is an awesome one from Dale. This is more of a hoop house shape, and I like this one because of the bins, and this is a really great technique with a full-fledged door you can walk in there, and kind of instead of building this, oftentimes we see the raised garden bed and then we see those cubes on top of the garden beds, but this is kind of a large enclosure built around the raised garden beds, which is really awesome, and we love seeing projects like this. And essentially, it's just a long arch. I imagine they probably split this up into, is it split up in half maybe? Not entirely sure. It looks like maybe it's one continuous piece. That looks much longer than 10 foot though, so it's probably broken up. Usually what I recommend in a situation like this where you want to create a large arch like this is to break it up into several bins and several pieces of conduit and then use couplings to join them back together and achieve the final desired length or height, whatever it is that you're after here, because it makes it a lot easier and you don't have to try to get something perfect. Or if you need a dimension that's larger than the off-the-shelf size, which is 10 foot length that you can get of conduit, then you can do this to kind of overcome that. And I imagine that's what Dale did here to do that. And essentially it's just 4 of those archways going back. And then it looks like, I think it's really just a lot of, I actually don't even see, it looks like there's connectors used in some places, but I think it's really just a lot of unique solutions for attaching the conduit. I don't even see a connector there. Looks like maybe a crossover clamp or a U-bolt of sorts to secure those pieces together. Same thing there, but we do see some MakerPipe T connectors and adjustable angle connectors to make this doorway. And then of course the gate latch and the gate hinges from Northwoods Engineered. Those are being used for this door, which are great things to recommend. If you're building an enclosure and need a gate, then those two things, the latches and the hinge, both work awesome and are great to incorporate. And I just love this build, really cool. And I just love the circular shape of it. Really cool. We see a lot of cubes and things, so I always love seeing bins, but really awesome. Thanks so much, Dale, for sharing this. Love seeing it. Last but not least is a build from Jasper, and I absolutely love this one. They made this enclosure for their container garden out there on their deck, as we can see, and it looks just like your standard cubular frame, as we can see here, but then if we look, we can see some hinges here, kind of a sneak peek of what's going to happen, and then boom, you get access to the whole container garden, and you just fold up the sides and the top panel really awesomely with those aluminum hinges that we've highlighted on the channel before. I'll link that video down below, but essentially they're just hinges made for PVC pipe, and you can get those to work with 3/4 inch EMT conduit if you kind of squeeze them together a little bit and then use self-drilling screws to secure those in place. But essentially, as we saw here, there is a hinge mounted there for that panel, and then there's also one mounted there's 2 mounted, I guess, for the front panel as well. So we can kind of see how this folds up, where essentially the front half lifts up, and then the top part also folds as well, and kind of folds up and out of the way, as we can see, because that's the very back of the panel. And then that is the front where we saw those 2 hinges mounted. So it just kind of folds up and then rests on top of the frame there. And so essentially, they just use MakerPipe T connectors to make a bunch of 2-dimensional rectangles, as we can see here. And then there's one in the middle there, one on the other side. And if you're making two-dimensional rectangles, then you'll want to use the T connector, not the 90-degree connector. That's what you'll use for the like cubular frames. But for these two-dimensional panel style frames, you're just going to use the T connector for those two-dimensional squares and rectangles. And that's exactly what Jasper did here. I think I do see some 90-degree connectors in the back because that is not a two-dimensional frame. That is, kind of the back half of the frame is a cube, and that's where the 90-degree connector is used. But everywhere else, it looks like T connectors to make these panels, and then using those aluminum hinges to be able to fold up the panels. And I just absolutely love this idea. Really awesome, really smart, and really clever. And just like all these builds, you can find more in the MakerPipe community or more on the YouTube channel. Hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, leave a like and consider subscribing. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.